All right, I'd like to introduce Sallie Vaughn. Sallie has been the GIS manager and director for Person County since 2015 and has previously worked in the public and private sector. She holds a bachelor's in anthropology and a master's in geography, both from East Carolina University. Her interests involve hiking and playing the euphonium. Is that correct?
Yeah, you got that exactly right. Anybody know what a euphonium is? Yay, I love that. Do you play as well? Perfect. It's a small tuba. It's a ton of fun to play as well. Well, thank you for the introduction. I'm Sallie, the GIS director for Person County, and I just wanted to sort of talk about this weird thing that happened in the county. I made some stuff I didn't expect what that outcome would be. So Trip, your presentation was great. It was very like dry. We're gonna get rid of the dry right now. So next slide, please. All right. I have been told repeatedly to not use this analogy, and I continue to use this analogy. GIS is the jello of local government. You've got fruits, you've got nuts, you might have some cheese or some dairy, some pretzels. Those are all really awesome, but they're way better suspended in jello, right? We're all from the South. We eat these things at on holidays, right? And so we will revisit this culinary delicacy later in our presentation. Next slide, please. All right, so Person County, this is our motto. Everything is better in person. Just to introduce the community a little bit, we're just north of Durham along the Virginia line. We've got a population of about 40,000 people. Roxborough is the main city, the only city. And it's a very rural community. So when you're thinking about animals, you may have a pet at home. You may have a goldfish, a ferret, a cat, whatever. A lot of the animals that people have in Person County are not necessarily pets. They're more farm implements. So you think animals that are used for hunting, they're used for keeping livestock safe, that type of thing. So just kind of remember that as we walk through this. Our animal services department does do some work for domestic livestock in the county, excuse me. Next slide, please. So our animal services department performs all the functions of a typical county shelter. It's almost like if the Department of Social Services and the Sheriff Department had a baby and that baby was an animal, that's animal services. And so basically it's where law enforcement and social services meet to ensure the welfare of our animals. And like everybody else, they enter their activities, their incidents into a system of record known as Shelter Manager. And that includes all kinds of stuff: animal cruelty investigations, rabies vaccinations, picking up puppies, all of that stuff. Next slide, please. So just a real quick introduction to Shelter Manager. It's an extremely low cost software as a service that they use for a system of record. Currently, it does have mobile and desktop capabilities, which is awesome. And it does have a large number of reports and graphs, which are largely unutilized by the staff in the county for a variety of reasons, and we'll talk about that. It has a map, like all things should, but it only shows the currently open calls, so you can't get any context. Like if you're going somewhere, you can't see what happened there yesterday, last week, last month. And it is a SQL-based like backend, and you can export that stuff to CSV. You could also write some SQL code, but I could never find a schema, so I'm not going there. Next slide, please. So this is basically what it looks like. It's not awesome. Just wanted to provide a screenshot of it. You do see a tab up there for active incidents. All right, next slide, please. So I talked to the animal services director and I said, what do you need? What keeps you up at night? What do you worry about? What metrics are you trying to meet that you can't? And we decided together that they need some maps to provide context to what they do. They need to make it easier to convey information within the department and to the public. They need to identify problem areas, identify repeat offenders, and change the perception of animal services within the community. And you're like, well, that's not GIS. All of that's GIS. Next slide, please. But if y'all know me, you know that I'm going to get something out of whatever it is I do. I needed the animal services department because they're low hanging fruit. The data was readily accessible. The director would work with me. So I sort of started in on that department strategically for that reason. I didn't start with the building department or some of these other groups. And what I needed out of that, like I said, low hanging fruit, accessible data, an on-premise. I would prefer on-premise database, but this is off. And I needed a proof of concept for future project development, but mostly I needed a success story. And we'll get to whether or not that happened. Next slide, please. All right, so I just wanted to give you a real quick, what the shelter manager reports look like. No one in animal services knows what to do with that. That's ridiculous. I don't know what to do with that. So like I said, there's no schema available. So I just export 5 CSVs monthly, drop them in a folder, and ArcPro takes it from there. Next slide, please. Yeah, so like I said, just run 5 reports. I do clean up some addresses and stuff. We have had discussions with staff, and they're inputting proper addresses a little bit better now. Just add the tables to Pro, run some models, some geoprocessing tools, and then I just post it to our production database. Next slide, please. I did create a custom address locator for animal services because they tend to use a lot of landmark information versus address information. And so I created a custom landmarks table for them. It's also been useful in other aspects of the county. Next slide, please. So the end result of this, I displayed in a hub. And so this is currently not publicly available. We've not figured out how to make it publicly available yet. And at the top of it there, you see some basic statistics. So at the time I took this screenshot, there are a little over 5,000 incidents in their database. And you can see 539 citations have been issued. And then essentially each of those topics, I spun up a dashboard on each of those topics. Let's see. So I kind of wanted to highlight one of the dashboards that I created. It helps answer that question of who are the repeat offenders, where are the repeat locations. So let's see, what's on the next slide? Okay, all right. These are some other things that I created that are also available on the hub. You can see they deal with more dogs than cats. Next slide, please. All right, so these are the 5 dashboards that I built that are accessible through the hub. Those little cards, link directly to those dashboards. So next slide, please. So this is essentially, if you needed to know what happened within the last month in the animal services department, there's one page you can go to figure that out instead of having to dig through all the different tabs in Shelter Manager, run a bunch of different reports, open them up in Excel. Basically, you can just look at it here. You can see that, there were 14 citations issued. 3 of them are currently overdue. There were no animal transfers, and we had an issue with strays within the last month. And overall incidents are down. There's a little bit of arcade in here to make things change colors as they go up and down. I think Columbus might have taught me that, actually. Next slide, please. Oh, and so here, if you wanted to look at all the incidents in the entire data set, there's a dashboard for that. You can, choose what time frame you would like to look at. You can choose, is there a particular, month or year that you would like to look at? Y'all have all seen dashboards. You've been dashboarded to death. Next slide, please. So this is the repeats dashboard. And this is one of the reasons we haven't really made this public. I don't think people would want their name showing up on a publicly available website, even though all this information is public data anyway. So this was really cool. So you see over on the left-hand side at the top, these are the top 10 owners whose names are repeating in the animal owner column in the data. We got some folks that are, up there 7, 8, 9 times. And sometimes their names don't get typed in correctly, so it maybe not an accurate count, but it kind of gives you an idea. You've got some folks that are just repeatedly having issues with animals. We've also got on the left-hand side in the middle there is the top 10 victims. So people who are getting bit by dogs, people who are being attacked by animals, that's who those folks are. And then on the left-hand side at the bottom are the repeat addresses. And what we found is you get bit by a dog, you go to the hospital. Animal Services is typing in the hospital address, not the address where it occurred, but they still felt that information was useful to them, so we didn't try to correct that issue. On the right-hand side, you've got, your different types of incidents. And so I am, at this point, going to switch over to and try to do a demo, even though Hope told me I shouldn't. I don't listen well. That's not mine. Okay, so this is the same repeats dashboard, and this is where things got interesting for me. This is what I was showing to people.
And Sally, real quick, if you want to click share screen and Zoom for us so the virtual attendees can see as well.
That would help, wouldn't it?
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so this is where things got interesting. This was sort of this is easy to understand. Like if you're not a GIS person, not a data person, a lot of what I do and talk about is difficult, but this is easy to understand. You've got people who repeatedly have issues with animals. You've got locations where things are getting reported over and over again. And we all understand conceptually what a stray animal is or an animal at large is. So this was what I used to show other people what GIS could do, what dashboards could do. And so I've been demoing this to anyone that will listen. But this is what I found interesting. Of course, this is interactive, so you can click on whatever incident type you would like to see, and you can, narrow down whatever you would like to see. And so I was kind of going through this one day with some folks I work with, and I've got to find a very specific thing to click on. Let me see, it's in my notes. Not that one. Okay, so I was literally showing this to somebody that I work with in the planning department, and this name popped up. So the top 10 animal owners that have had welfare incidents, reported for them are listed in the top left-hand corner. And what we noticed were these people. If you click on them, you can kind of get an idea of, where they live, where their issues are, that type of thing. But that name, everybody knows those people. If you work in a county, everybody knows, you've all got the same problem, people. And so I'm going to zoom in and see if we can examine this a little bit further. All right, it takes 2 fingers to zoom. So what do you guys see? That's nasty, right? Yeah, it's a mess, exactly. So these individuals, while they have an animal welfare issue, they also are the embodiment of a code violation. That's technically been deemed a junkyard by the county. They had to put a fence around it, had to pay us back monthly for the fence. There's more than one house out there. There's people living in RVs. There's goats, piles of trash. And so we found that interesting, so I'm basically, hey, proof of concept. And people are going, wait a second, I know those people. I just sent my code enforcement officer out there. Or, oh, I know who they are. They had an issue with a couple of chickens last year or whatever. And so it really kind of hit home to me that GIS could be a tool to provide information to everybody. Like I said, like the fruits and nuts in the Jell-O salad, you got to mix them in with the Jell-O, right? If you're a code enforcement officer, would you want to know that the location you are going to is known for letting dogs attack people? Yes. If you were a police officer, would you want to know that there are probably wild dogs on the property before you go out there? Yes. If you are a social services worker, we've had to get social services involved here. Would you want to know that somebody has a meth problem? Yes. And so this is just kind of an unintentional outcome of this project that people went, oh yeah, you can do that. We can share this information. I don't have to go and call the 911 guy and ask him questions anymore. No, if he'll give me the data, I can do it. And so this sort of started a waterfall of like data coming into my department. So now in addition to all the CAMA stuff, I get the animal services stuff. I'm getting 911 stuff. I'm getting planning and zoning things and environmental health stuff. And, you know, the building inspections database is slowly working its way into GIS. So this was really kind of a waterfall incident for me. So, and with that, I'll go back to the PowerPoint and be done quickly.
Great. If you'll just click stop sharing at the top for me.
That would help, wouldn't it? I'm not technologically savvy when it comes to these things. All right. All right, so I'll take the next slide, please. There was my backup picture just in case I couldn't do a demo. All right, next slide, please. So where do we go from here? You've got to identify your stakeholders. There is somebody with their thumb on every database in your county, your municipality, wherever it is you work, and you got to go and grease that thumb. It might show them the dashboard, buy them cookies, whatever it takes. You've got to identify those people. But you also need to identify the consumers of that data. So especially with our 911 folks, they're happy to give me the data, but they wanted to know who's going to be looking at it, even though it's all public record. Well, I'm only going to share these types of things with EM, or I'm only going to share these types of things with law enforcement. It's not shared publicly. So you kind of have to identify your end users up front, or your database people won't work with you. Identify those data sources. Like I said, there will probably be a gatekeeper somewhere. Get to know your IT people. If it's on-premise stuff, you're going to need your IT people. Discuss the information exchange and expectations that people have. What do they need? What do they want to see? What do they not want to show other people? And dangle the carrot if you have to. Absolutely. Show them a dashboard. Show them something that somebody did at this conference. Like, I fully plan to forward your presentation to our city manager because he told me we didn't have any lead pipes, and I don't believe him. So here you can see the fruits and nuts of a good Jell-O salad. I definitely put building inspections on the marshmallows for a reason. So I'll take the next slide, please. So, you know, kind of continuing that theme, where do we go from here? You've got to gain access to multiple data sources, or you just don't have anything to work with. Something I found useful was offering to provide some additional analytical capability along the way. So my long-term intent is to have a situational awareness dashboard. And that's great, but 911 needed a way to pull reports using GIS, or, you know, some of the functions of GIS that don't really fit into my long-term plan for the situational awareness dashboard. So I offered them some additional analytical capabilities just to kind of grease that wheel. So they would work with me. They'd let me have their data. I also like to work on one stakeholder or one data set at a time on a project like this. But then when you hit a milestone, you let everybody know you've hit that milestone. So it's not like you've just stopped talking to them, that you've gone dark or whatever. You know, tell your building inspector you now have 911 data available to the group if he wants to see it. And that sort of, you know, keeps them thinking about you, makes them realize that you are doing something. And then always exhibit your proof of concept, which in this case is the lime Jell-O salad. Is that anybody's favorite? That's my favorite. And with that, I'll take the next slide. So returning to this project for animal services really checked a lot of boxes for me. The low hanging fruit, accessible data. Don't have the on-premise database management, but it's easy enough to get hold of. And I would definitely have a proof of concept that I now use for future projects. And I really do have an odd success story. It's not what I thought it would be, but it definitely opened people's eyes to how integrated we all actually are in county government, that we really are. I mean, we always talk about silos. We at least could get our silos on the same farm, if not open the silos up to one another. And so that would be, my take on it. I don't know, it worked out in a way I didn't quite expect. So, and I'll hopefully finish up. What's the next slide? Yes, I'm done. Questions? So the question is about how do I plan to integrate data sets from various sources, and some are on premise, some are off premise. That's tough. If it's on prem for us, it's all SQL, so I'm good to go. And we are largely on prem. Thankfully, we're like 75% on prem, so I'm good to go. Me and the SQL guy get along great. He likes chocolate chip cookies. I'm a good baker. You got to grease the wheel. But it is going to have to come with a grain of salt. I can only update this animal services stuff monthly. It's just a time issue. I'd love to do it daily, weekly. I don't have that kind of time. And so it's definitely going to have to come with a grain of salt, that what you're looking at may be outdated for some data sets. And that's just going to require, education of the users. I don't know. It's just, that's what we do all day, right? Is move data around. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Do you have any in the chat box? All right. That's all I got. Thanks.